Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and I'm driving back from Connecticut, where I just participated in the Connecticut Libertarian Party convention and debate. And the debate was live streamed. I'm sure they'll be posting it soon if they haven't already done so. I made my own recording of it, but I don't know if it came out yet or not. But I thought I'd give you some perspectives here as I'm driving back to Virginia from Connecticut, and especially on a couple of points that I think are extremely important in this race for this party's nomination. During the debate, Chase Oliver, one of the competitors for this nomination, was explaining why he only got 2% of the vote in his race for U.S. Senate in Georgia about a year ago. And he said that the reason he only got 2% was because his opponents, Herschel Walker, the Republican, and Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, outspent him. I don't remember what the factor is, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, whatever. And that's the reason why he only got 2%. And the implication being that if he had had a large amount of money to match them, he would have gotten more votes. This is a critically important point because it is a point I challenge, because it suggests that the problem that the party faces in these presidential races is one of money. And I'm saying that is just not the case. This is a problem of a bad message. In other words, I'm saying that the reason that 98% of the voters in Georgia voted against Chase Oliver was not because he didn't spend enough money, but because of his message. They reject the message. And like I've stated in previous forums and debates, in South Carolina, the debate, the forum in Maine, I'm with the 99% and the 98%. I reject this message too. It's a bad message for our party. And that if we're going to get this party on the right track, we need to change directions completely. And that means restoring the brand of principled libertarianism on which our party was founded and running a presidential campaign that's based on pure, genuine, 100%, no exceptions, genuine libertarian principles. If we do that, all of a sudden we're going to achieve a big breakout in the vote, even without this large amount of money that Chase is referring to. Okay, now, why do I say this? Well, because Chase's race actually buttresses my point. Let's set aside one reason, one possible reason that 98% of the voters voted against Chase. It wasn't anything personal. It's not like they found Chase to be an obnoxious guy or pompous guy, because Chase Oliver is one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. And you'll see in the debate, he's passionate, he's excited, he's dedicated. He's traveling around the country sharing his message. He's excited about his message. So that we can eliminate that as a possible reason why people voted against him. I mean, if he was an obnoxious guy or a boring guy, you could say, well, maybe that's why people voted against him. You can't say that about Chase Oliver, okay? So we can eliminate that right off the bat as a possible reason as to why he had this 98% rejection rate. Now, if there's any Libertarian Party candidate who cannot say that he did not get his message out, it's Chase. Chase had millions of dollars of advertising. Now, he didn't spend that money, but he got that kind of free publicity. It was incredible. I mean, I think he got more publicity than our presidential candidate in 2020 by a factor of 100 or maybe 500. I mean, if you had to buy the amount of publicity that Chase got, you'd have to spend, I don't know, $10 million, $20 million. A Libertarian Party presidential candidate's never going to have that kind of money. But he effectively had that kind of money through free advertising. And there's not really any difference between free advertising and paid advertising. I mean, advertising is advertising. And he should be commended for this. Bloomberg, ABC, CBS, Washington Post, New York Times, Rolling Stone. Okay, Rolling Stone pointed out Chase was the most influential libertarian in America. Massive publicity. Okay, why? Well, because he was the deciding factor on whether there was going to be a runoff or not between the Republican Herschel Walker and the Democrat Raphael Warnock. And the reason he got so much publicity is that this was one of the defining races as to who was going to have control over the U.S. Senate, the Democrats or the Republicans. Not only that, but Chase got into one of the statewide debates. I mean, you know how you often hear, oh, Jacob, if only we'd gotten into the debates. Well, Chase got into the debate. So he got his message out. I mean, the whole state of Georgia was transfixed on this race and on these debates, including this particular debate. And the Republican did not show up, Herschel Walker. So Chase had half the time in this debate to get his message out. And he got his message out. The moderators are very courteous. They let him have half the time in this debate, and with Warnock getting the other half of the time. So in this debate, Chase gets his message out. Now, what is that message? Well, the centerpiece of his message was, he says, he was exhorting people to vote for him. He says, vote for me, because I will be a better proponent, and this is his term, smaller government and lower taxes than Herschel Walker, the Republican. So he's clearly appealing to Republican voters to vote for him because he's going to be a better exponent of small government and lower taxes. Okay, is that a popular position, popular mantra? Absolutely, in the Republican Party. Okay, I mean, the small government, lower taxes has always been a popular position in the Republican Party. But the fallacy has been that you can take what's successful in the Republican Party, and this is my objection to this message, and translate it over to a Libertarian Party presidential candidate or Senate candidate or House candidate, and it'll have the same success. But it doesn't. It's been an absolute failure. This is why the Wall Street Journal is already reporting that the LP presidential candidate gets 1%. Right now, the electorate is saying 1% of us is going to vote for the Libertarian Party presidential candidate, because they're already factoring that we're going to run this standard message that we've been running for 20, 25 years of reform and Republican light. Now, Chase says in this debate that he favored FDA reform. Okay? The operative word is reform, not abolition, which is what I favor. I mean, I favor a total separation of healthcare in the state. Get government entirely out of healthcare. Okay? But Chase doesn't believe that. He says, no, we got to have reform of the FDA. And so you've got this reform message that has become standard, that has now defined our presidential races and our congressional races, our Senate races. He favors school choice, okay, vouchers as a way to reform the educational system. I totally oppose this. Vouchers are a standard socialist reform vehicle that violate the core principle of our party, the non-aggression principle. They use taxes to take money from one group of people and give it to another group of people. He favors monetary reform. In the debate with Warnock, he said that he favors the repeal of mandatory minimum sentences, okay, which would lower the amount of sentences that drug war offenders get. Interestingly enough, Warnock said, well, I oppose the jailing of nonviolent drug offenders, which gave Chase the perfect opportunity to say, well, so do I. I want to legalize all drugs, but he didn't. He left it there at just repealing mandatory minimum sentences as a way to reform the criminal justice system. In other words, reform, reform, reform. Same thing with Medicare and Medicaid. He never called for the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid. He said he just opposes the expansion of Medicaid. That was the message he gave during the debate. He said that he wants Congress to read the bills. He wants to make the duopoly work. So it's this message that got out to the voters of Georgia. Okay? A message of reform and what I call Republican light. Immigration reform. That was another thing, that he wants to streamline the immigration system so that it works more efficiently. That you let in more immigrants. And the operative word is let, allow. Okay? That's the position of all my opponents here, that the government should allow more immigrants in. Okay, Allow and freedom are two completely opposite things. When the government's allowing you to engage in a purely peaceful economic activity, that is not freedom, okay? Freedom entails the exercise of fundamental rights. There's no such thing as allow when it comes to freedom. You have a right to do something. You don't need to seek permission from the government. But immigration reform is another thing that separates us in this race. All of my opponents favor the immigration control system, which is a socialist system. It's a system based on central planning. It comes with a police state. It comes with inspection stations. And they all want to say, well, I can fix this system. I can reform this system. Just like Republicans. Republicans say the same thing. But it's a reform system. And that was the message that went out to every voter in Georgia. So voters of Georgia knew what Chase's message was. It doesn't matter that he would have spent or gotten free publicity worth another $10 million or so, because every voter in Georgia already knew his message. And once voters know your message, it doesn't matter whether you spend another $10 million, because they just know your message doubly well. And at the end of this process, 98% of the voters said, no, we reject this. And I'm with them. I reject it too. Just like I reject the message that the Wall Street Journal poll is reflecting. Now, let me give you another example of this reform message that I think is just horrific for this party. One of the other candidates in the race is Lars Mapstead. Tremendously nice guy. I've gotten to know Lars. Okay, you can't help but like Lars Mapstead. Tremendously successful businessman, no question about it. So a centerpiece of Lars's message is he's advocating a national sales tax, what he calls the fair tax. And he models this after an organization called fairtax.org. So he wants to abolish the income tax, which is great. It should be abolished. But he wants to replace it with a national sales tax. And according to fairtax.org, that would be 23%. I don't know if Lars goes that high. I think he's mentioned 18%, not really sure. But the fact is that when you've got a political party that says, taxation is theft, and then you've got a presidential candidate that says, we're advocating a sales tax of 18% or 23%, how is anybody going to vote for that kind of message? I mean, it's horrific. Now, why a sales tax? Well, America lived without an income tax and a sales tax for more than 100 years, both. They had excise taxes and tariffs. I don't defend those either. But Americans proved that you can live in a society for over a century without either a sales tax or an income tax. So why not just call for, at a bare minimum, the abolition of the income tax? Okay? And without replacing it with anything. Well, because if you believe that Social Security needs to be continued as an off-ramp, okay, for the next 30 years or 50 years or 70 years because you say that there's a contract with this socialist program that needs to be honored, well, then now you need to fund this thing. I mean, the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid total $66 trillion. That's double the national debt. So if you're going to continue these socialist programs, which I totally oppose, okay? But my opponents say, no, you've got to honor this contract with socialism. Well, now you need this huge taxation system. Or if you're going to advocate a system of immigration controls, which all of my opponents favor, you need the military. Because clearly the police state has not worked to seal the border, and they all want to stop illegal immigration. So that means the military. I mean, there's no other way that you can make this system work at this point. If Republicans are understanding that, so are Democrats. I mean, Biden is sending troops down there too. So you need the massive military establishment to enforce your immigration control system. You need this massive taxation system. Now, a sales tax is going to fall disproportionately on the poor. I mean, the wealthy people would love this system, okay? Abolish the income tax. Wow, man, no more income tax. But it falls disproportionately on the poor. And so you've got a political party that's saying, oh, we want a regressive tax on the poor. And to deal with this, Lars says, oh, well, we can have a rebate program for the poor, which sounds an awfully lot like a welfare check that's going to be sent out to poor people. And how is poverty going to be defined? Are they going to be keeping receipts of all their sales taxes? So now the poor got to keep track of all their little papers of everything they buy over the course of the year to get a rebate on their sales taxes. Or how is poverty going to be defined? Is it going to be defined as income level, net worth? Is it going to be a flat rebate check that is sent out to people, or is it going to depend on their receipts? Most important, why should the Libertarian Party be advocating this kind of system? It's horrific, especially when you don't need it. If you advocate the repeal of the welfare state and the deep state, which is what I advocate, because at a very minimum, we've seen that America can live without an income tax and a sales tax. If you dismantle the national security state and you restore a limited government republic, which is what we had for more than 100 years, with just a basic small, relatively small military, no social security, no Medicare, no welfare state at all. So, you know, people say, oh, Jacob, your system is pie in the sky. How can it be pie in the sky when Americans lived with this kind of system for more than 100 years with no social security, no Medicare, no Medicaid, no income taxation, no sales taxation? This is a minimum standard for achieving a free society. And that's what we need to do. I mean, we already know the results of the 2024 election. We already know that because the consumers are telling us this. The voters are telling us this with that Wall Street Journal poll at 1%. That's no different from what we got 3 years ago. If things haven't changed over the last 3 years, they're not going to change over the next 12 months. So we already know the consumers are saying, we reject this message that you guys are putting out in this party. And they're right to reject it. I reject it too. And so if we're going to get a big breakout, which is very possible, of 10 to 15%, we need to change directions. But change directions in a very dramatic way. And the direction that we need to change is away from welfare, warfare state, and Republican light, which is characterizing all of my opponents: immigration reform, monetary reform, Social Security reform, Medicare reform, health care reform, educational reform, and Republican light, and move toward the founding principles of this party, which is what I'm enunciating here. Now, do I have a difficult task? Absolutely, because immigration reform and monetary reform and all these reform methods have become well established in this party. Unfortunately, it's deeply ingrained. I mean, there's actually people that loathe the genuine principles of our party, which is very ironic because I hold that there's a big body of votes out there that'll vote for our message. I mean, this is why I bring up my race 20 years ago for U.S. Senate, where I call for open borders, abolishing public schooling, separating school and state, separating healthcare in the state, separating retirement in the state, separating money in the state. I got 7% of the vote, not 0.07, 7% of the vote. That was 2 years after the presidential candidate for the LP got 0.03, less than 0.5%. And the same thing is with respect to Mike Termont. Mike's one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. But he proved also, just a year ago, he ran for Congress with this reform-oriented message: monetary reform, Social Security reform, reform. And out of 55,000 votes cast, he got less than 1%. And he's running on the same message. So is Chase. And there's no reason to believe that the Wall Street Journal poll that says we still give you 1% is going to change anything. We have to move this party in a completely different direction if we want that major breakout of 10 to 15%. And that major change of direction is restoring the genuine principles on which this party was founded, the principles I'm running on. But I'm not unmindful of the difficult nature of this task. This reform message and Republican light message is very deeply ingrained in this party, has been for 20 years. But we also know that it is a message that generates maximum 1%. That's what the Wall Street Journal poll is already telling us. You're going to get 1% again with this message. You want to achieve a breakout, the price to be paid is a real soul searching here, and ultimately an abandonment of this strategy of welfare, warfare, state reform, and Republican light, and a restoration of our founding principles, the core principles of this party and our philosophy, which is what I'm enunciating in this race. If we do that, then we achieve the breakout of 10 to 15%. But more important, we lead America to liberty with this message, because you're not, and that's our job in this party. You're not going to lead America to liberty with a reform message. All you're going to do is lead America to more welfare, warfare, state reform of our serfdom, welfare, warfare, state serfdom. That in order to achieve liberty, you've got to make the case for liberty. And that's what I'm saying that we need to do in this party. We need to do some soul searching in this party. Do you want to continue going with the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result when the voters are already telling us that you're going to get the same result, 1%? Or do you want to go with a different message, a message that can garner you the breakout of 10 to 15%, but the price to be paid is abandoning this standard message that has come to define our presidential races and go with a message of genuine Libertarian Party principles that I hold there is a large number of people that will vote for this message but will not vote for Republican light and welfare, warfare, state reform, which we've already seen in the Wall Street Journal poll of 1%. So that's my immediate take on the debate. The next debate's going to be in January in Arizona. Look forward to that one. But this is my take on the most current debate from the Connecticut Libertarian Party, and I appreciate you guys tuning in, and thank you again to the Connecticut Libertarian Party for hosting this and for having all of us there to share our perspectives. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.